The first point I want to make is the obvious point, which is that if you have sex before marriage, you are risking huge detrimental outcomes. Number one, unwanted pregnancy. If you don't have sex before marriage, you can't have an unwanted pregnancy. I guess you could technically not want a kid in your marriage, but it's way better to have an accidental kid with someone you love and trust and you've dedicated your life to than with a random hookup. And I think everyone can agree with that. Second, STDs. I want to go as far to say you can't get an STD with your wife. If you can get an STD with your wife, then you have a plethora of other problems, because either you didn't vet your wife properly or your wife is cheating on you, and both are horrible outcomes. But so you're basically completely eliminating STDs, sexual diseases that come from random hookups. The third part is birth control. Why do people take birth control? This is for the females, but people take birth control because they want to prevent unwanted pregnancy. Yet birth control has a number of bad outcomes. In fact, I just read recently that a lot of divorces come because when someone meets their potential partner, their potential wife, husband, they're on birth control when they meet them. And birth control puts them in this woozy state that makes them more easily attracted. And then years down the line after they get married and they decide they want to have a kid, so they come off birth control for the first time, their emotions rapidly change and they don't feel the same interest that they did when they were on birth control. So if you fall in love with someone on birth control and then you later in your marriage decide you want to have a kid and you come off birth control, that has been proven to have a significant effect on divorce. So the obvious answers are avoiding unwanted pregnancies, avoiding STDs, and avoiding birth control. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in the obvious category. The next thing I want to move on to is divorce rates and marriage satisfaction. So I don't like to be Mr. Statistics guy. When I was preparing for this podcast, I almost just wrote a bunch of statistics down and I was going to come here and lay them in your face. But my issue with statistics is that people say them and the average podcast listener is not going to go check them or verify them. And I don't want to get in the habit of just spitting statistics that no one's ever going to check and then think I haven't even checked the sources myself. But what I will reference one study, which is from the Institute of Family Studies, and it basically shows that your partners, however many partners you've had before your wife, before your husband, directly correlate with your divorce percentage. So if you have 0 partners, if you're a virgin when you enter marriage, then your chance of divorce is the lowest it will be. Every single partner you have before marriage increases your chance of divorce. I will link the Institute of Family Studies below, and you can go look at that and decide how real you feel it is, but they're not the only company to do this study. This study has been repeated by a variety of companies, and every time it's been repeated, the amount of partners before marriage directly increases the divorce percentage. Third, I don't know if we're on the third point. I honestly forgot. Then, marriage satisfaction. Same people, Institute for Family Studies, they have found that marriage satisfaction is directly correlated to how many partners you have before your husband or wife. So the more partners you have before marriage, the less likely you are to be highly satisfied in your marriage. I'm assuming the study was done by surveys. Surveys aren't the most reliable thing in the world, but in a way they are in this study because you're reporting on your own satisfaction. And the study says that based on how many partners you had before marriage, the more you've had, the less likely you are to say, I am highly satisfied with my marriage. And this makes complete sense. We're now going to move into the exciting part of the podcast where I actually explain to you why it makes complete sense. Non-obvious, complete sense of why you should not have sex before marriage. And the first thing is, have you ever heard the argument? Maybe you haven't heard the argument because you're not running around telling all your college friends to stop having sex before marriage. But the number one argument I've heard is, would you ever buy a car that you can't test drive? They say, oh, but if you wait to have sex before marriage, then you're not going to know if you like the vehicle. I'm not going to lie, when I heard this argument, I was like, pretty good point. However, let's take it to the maximum extreme. Let's take someone who's had 0 partners, so they have not test drive their vehicle before they get married, and let's take someone who has had 100 partners. Let's ignore the soul ties and all the rest of the points I'll get into. Every partner you have is another person to compare your potential wife, your potential husband to. So if you have 100 partners and you go through your list of 100 people and you go, this person, partner number 76 was the best sexual experience. I need my husband, I need my wife to be as good as partner 76. But then every single partner you're having sex with, quote unquote, test driving the vehicle, becomes another person to compare your future husband, your future wife to. So if you take the reverse of that, someone who's had 0 partners before marriage and they only have the one person they're having sex with, even if it was the worst sex they've ever had, simultaneously being the best sex they've ever had because they've never had sex, they have nothing to compare it to. They don't know that it's bad or good. They just know this is sex. Maybe they're underwhelmed, maybe they're overwhelmed, but they have nothing to compare it to, and therefore there's more encouragement to get better with that one person. Whereas if you're the person who slept with 100 people before you get married, and then you marry someone who's decent at sex, you're going to be like, dang, half the people I've slept with were better sexual partner than this person. And that's just going into sex. But let's talk about the other traits. If you have 100 people to compare to, and I know I'm being extreme with 100. I know that probably 99.9% of people don't have 100 partners, but I'm extrapolating out to 100 because it makes the point more valuable. This doesn't go for just sex. If you sleep with 100 people, what if one partner was the best sexual partner and another partner was the best romantic partner and another partner was the most caring partner and another partner was the most listening partner, and then you're like, you want partner 101 to be the best of every single category. That is so unlikely. It's so unrealistic. Every partner you sleep with before you get married is another person to compare your possible wife or possible husband to. I'm sure you've all heard, and most of you agree with the idea that comparison is the thief of joy. So this whole test driving the car analogy argument I think is pretty silly. Now, I want to ask you something. If you're in college, or even if you're in high school, if you're my age, if you're older than high school, I'd be willing to bet you've known someone who was in a toxic relationship. Either you yourself was in a toxic relationship, or you've known someone who has been in a toxic relationship. Have you ever had a friend in a toxic relationship and they're coming to you, they're telling you about their problems, and you just give them the easiest answer, the easiest way out? You say, break up with that person. You guys are clearly not meant to be together. But no matter how much you and your other group of friends tells this person to end the relationship, they just can't do it. And it's not that they know the person, it's not that they don't know the person's wrong. When you're in a toxic relationship, you know the person's wrong. There's usually things happening, constant arguments. Maybe there's even physical abuse. You know it's wrong, but you struggle to leave the relationship. Why is that? If it's so obvious for all the people around you, and they're all telling you to break up with that toxic person, why can't you do it? Why is this the case? There's a scientific explanation for it. When we have sex with someone, our brain dumps this hormone called oxytocin, often referred to as the love hormone. I was debating whether I should use the word soul tie, because I know soul tie sounds woo-woo to some of you non-religious people out there, and soul tie might sound like something else to the spiritual people out there, but it doesn't need to be explained as a soul tie. The point is, when you have sex with someone, your brain dumps oxytocin, and when your brain dumps oxytocin, you're more likely to overlook someone's bad traits. When your brain dumps oxytocin, you're more likely to fall in love with someone, and when you fall in love with someone, I put quotations because love is not a hole that you fall in, but when your brain dumps oxytocin, you're more likely to overlook someone's bad traits and just be overwhelmed by this love hormone, and you'll see them for the good in them. And so even when all your friends look at your partner, they've never had sex with your partner, hopefully. They've never had sex with your partner, so their brains aren't dumping with oxytocin. So they just look at it and they look at the reasonable, logical points. They go, you guys argue all the time, you need to break up. They go, it treats you so poorly, you need to break up. But your brain dumped with the oxytocin and the sex goes, but we can make it work, but all these good parts, all these bad parts. So basically, what oxytocin does is it makes you overlook the bad traits of someone. Now, before you get married, why would you ever want to overlook the bad traits of someone? There's no situation before marriage where you'd want to overlook the bad traits of someone, because many people will tell you marriage is the most important decision you'll make in your life. If marriage is one of the most important decisions you'll make in your life, why is that? That is because you want to pick someone who's the most compatible, the best suiting, someone who's going to better you and advance you. And if you're having sex with them, dumping oxytocin in your brain, and you're overlooking all the bad traits, then you're going to miss out on all the red flags, to put it in Gen Z terms. So before marriage, you literally want to notice all the bad things. You want to notice all the incompatible traits. You want to assess whether someone is right for you. Yet, what is the only situation in which you'd want to overlook someone's bad traits? After marriage. If you ask anyone, do they want to get in a divorce? They tell you no. No one gets married if they wanted to get in a divorce. So every single person who's getting married, you can basically assume does not want to get a divorce. And if someone doesn't want to get a divorce, then their goal is that after marriage, they would overlook their bad traits. That after marriage, they would say, I understand you have bad traits, but we're going to make it work. So what would they do? They would have sex. The oxytocin would dump in the brain, and you would use sex and oxytocin as a way to overlook your lifelong partner's bad traits and focus on the good. It makes complete sense that sex should become after marriage, and sex should not be there before marriage. Sex before marriage prevents you from picking the best possible partner. Sex after marriage makes it realistic that you can end up with your partner despite all their bad traits. So, to sum this up, there's three non-religious points as to why you should not have sex before marriage, which is one, the obvious points: to avoid unwanted pregnancy, to avoid STDs, to avoid birth control, to avoid abortions. Even if you don't think abortions are bad, does anyone want to go through the experience of abortion? To avoid putting Plan B in your body. So the first point is avoiding all the bad, obvious stuff: STDs, unwanted pregnancies, birth control, etc. The second point is that statistically, Institute of Family Studies, if you want to look it up, it will be linked below. Statistically, marriage satisfaction is higher for those who have less partners before marriage, and statistically, divorce rates are the lowest for the people who have the lowest partners before marriage. So, first point, avoiding the bad, obvious stuff. Second point, marriage satisfaction and lower divorce rates among lowest partners before marriage. And third, toxic relationships. If you dump oxytocin by having sex with someone, you're going to overlook their bad traits. You never want to overlook someone's bad traits before marriage, yet you always want to overlook someone's bad traits after marriage. So that in itself, I also mentioned in there the comparison. Every single partner you have before marriage is a potential person to compare your wife to, is a potential person to compare your husband to. So I just want to repeat it one more time. Number one, avoiding the obvious downfalls: STDs, unwanted pregnancy, birth control. Number two, higher marriage satisfaction for lower sexual partners before marriage. Also, number two, lower divorce rates for lower partners before marriage. Number three, every single partner you have before marriage is someone you will compare your future husband and wife to. You wonder why people are less satisfied in marriage when they have more partners? Because they go, oh, my wife wasn't as good as this past partner. My husband wasn't as good as this past partner in this area. Comparison is a thief of joy. Don't set yourself up to compare your husband to multiple people. And finally, the brain dumped in oxytocin during sex makes you overlook someone's bad traits, which is something you would never want to do before marriage and is something you would always want to do after marriage. So that is my non-religious argument for avoiding sex before marriage. I hope you liked it.